Last month, King Charles and Queen Camilla visited Australia on their royal tour. And many thousands upon thousands of people, including our own Father Aldrin, went to greet him on the steps of the Opera House. And that might be hard for some of us to grasp or get our heads around the significance, the purpose of having a king these days. Because we in Australia, we are a democracy. We like to choose our leaders. We are a meritocracy. We like the idea that you earn your place. And yet King Charles is not king because of anything noteworthy he has said or done. I can't think of anything particularly he's said or done these last couple of years. But nonetheless, he's not king because of any of those things. He is innately king by virtue of who he is, that he is the monarch of England and therefore is the head of state of Australia. Whether we like that or not, that's a fact and something which is simply given to us. And so that might help us, though, to think about Jesus and the title of king that we give to him. Through most of his earthly ministry, Jesus rejected the title or the role of king. There were times when people wanted him to be the king of Israel, and yet he rejected it or walked away. But at the very end of his earthly life, at his trial, he then finally claims the kingship. He begins by talking about the kingdom. He says, mine is a kingdom, but it's not a kingdom of this world. And so when challenged, says, so are you a king? Jesus says, yes, I am a king. I am a king and I was born for this, to bear witness to the truth. And so Jesus he names himself as king right at the very end. And we have given him that title king ever since. And the title of king that belongs to Jesus, again, is not because of anything he said particularly or even did. No, that everything Jesus says and does is important and it's amplified by who he is. But Jesus' importance is because of who he is innately. That Jesus is divine. He is the Son of God. He is co-equal with God. He is God. And so he is God from the very moment of his birth, or even indeed his conception on earth. He doesn't become king. He is king. And that's why we celebrate Christmas. And I'll say more about that in just a moment. But let's think, though, about the centrality of Jesus. By naming him king, it helps us to reaffirm that he is the center of Christianity. He is the center of our faith. And that's important to note, because I think there are many people perhaps, who are drawn to the church, drawn to Catholicism, because of other things other than the person of Jesus. People often get their children baptized because of family and tradition, and that's all well and good, but that's not the end point. The family tradition might help us get to the point where we come to be baptized, but then we need to take our child on that journey to get to know and love Jesus in their lives. Many people, I think, are attracted to Catholic schools because of the Catholic values, and that's good because the Catholic values we teach are a great way to live, but they're not Christ. We need to make sure that people who come attracted by those Catholic values continue on to meet Christ himself and don't get stuck in the doorway of the values alone. Indeed, even for more mature Catholics who've been faithful church members for years and decades, we can sometimes find ourselves more aligned with certain values than with Jesus himself. There are people in the church who are passionately committed to certain issues of social justice and human rights, and these are good things. These are all absolutely compatible with our faith in Jesus, and they come hopefully from our faith in him, but they're not him. Likewise, there are people who are equally committed to and passionate about pro-life issues, things like the dignity of life and life in the very moment of conception and in the womb. And this too is an important value that flows from faith in Jesus, but it's not Jesus himself. So in a church like ours, we can have people who often are quite divided politically. In fact, there are people often who vote opposite ways, often around those two sets of values. But that's okay, because our unity is not in our values. Our unity is in the person of Jesus. And we may have different charisms that lead us to live out that faith in Jesus in different causes and different passions, including the ones I've just mentioned. But so we need to come back to the centrality of Jesus himself. It's why the things we do to worship him, every effort we can give in devotion and worship matters, because Jesus deserves that and so much more. All we can give him is never enough. Jesus is king and he deserves our all, our utmost all. So let's think about the next few weeks. Today is the feast of Christ the King, and we honor and name Jesus as King today. But we recognize that Jesus was King from the very moment of his birth. So next week we begin the Advent journey that points the way to Christmas yet again. And Christmas is the extraordinary paradoxical celebration that this child born in a poor family in a stable in Bethlehem is in fact the King of the universe. And some of the stories around Christmas, the things like the wise men coming to give gifts like gold, help to point the way and show that truth. So let's today rejoice at the high point of the church's year, who Jesus is. Jesus is Christ the King for us and with us. Let's focus on living out the values which flow from our faith in Jesus, but let those values never replace our personal devotion to and love for him.